The scent of warm cinnamon and vanilla filled the air as Daniel sat cross-legged on the attic floor, sifting through a worn-out box of childhood memories. Dust particles danced in the rays of the afternoon sun filtering through the tiny window. Old photographs, tattered report cards, and faded birthday cards spilled onto the wooden floor. He traced his fingers over a picture of himself at age 10, standing between his older brother, Christopher, and younger sister, Lily. Christopher, the star athlete, had his arms around Daniel's shoulders, grinning confidently. Lily, the musical prodigy, held her violin, her smile as radiant as ever. And there he was, Daniel, the forgotten middle child, barely noticed in the frame, looking away as if he had already accepted his fate. A lump formed in his throat as he recalled those years, the countless times his achievements were overshadowed, his presence barely acknowledged. As memories flooded back, he allowed himself to relive his journey, a journey of struggle, self-discovery, and the desperate yearning for love. He picked up a small notebook from the box, its corners frayed with age. It was his childhood diary, a secret companion to his unspoken thoughts. Flipping through the pages, he saw entries filled with hopes, dreams, and disappointments. March 12, 2005, Christopher won another trophy today. Mom and Dad took him out for ice cream. I got a B+ on my math test, but no one asked. June 7, 2006, Lily played at her school concert. She was amazing. Everyone clapped. I told Mom I won the spelling bee, but she was too busy fixing Lily's dress. The words blurred as his eyes welled up. He had spent so much of his childhood trying to be seen, to be valued, yet he had remained in the background, a shadow among the shining stars of his siblings. Sighing, he leaned back against an old wooden trunk, inhaling the familiar scent of dust and aged paper. It was strange, he thought, how some wounds never truly heal. Even now, as an adult, the echoes of neglect lingered in his heart. As he sat there, lost in thought, a distant memory surfaced, one of the rare moments when he had felt special. It was his 8th birthday. His grandmother, the only person who had ever truly noticed him, had given him a small leather-bound journal. "Write your own story, Daniel," she had said. "One day, the world will listen." He had clung to those words, finding solace in them whenever he felt invisible. Writing had been his refuge, his way of carving out a space where he mattered. But had it been enough? Had he truly escaped the shadows of his past? A soft knock on the attic door startled him. He turned to see his wife, Emily, standing there, a gentle smile on her lips. "Dinner's ready," she said. "You've been up here for hours." Daniel nodded, closing the notebook. He glanced around the attic one last time before standing up, a newfound determination settling in his chest. Perhaps it was time to stop dwelling on the past and start embracing the life he had built. But as he followed Emily downstairs, he couldn't shake the feeling that his story, the one he had spent his entire life writing, was far from over. This time, he would make sure he was truly seen. Daniel Bennett was born into a family where excellence was the norm. His father, Henry Bennett, was a highly regarded corporate lawyer, a man with an intimidating presence and high expectations. His mother, Evelyn, was once a promising pianist who had given up her career to focus on raising their children, particularly Lily, who inherited her musical talent. Their home was always filled with schedules, competitions, and rehearsals. There was little room for idleness, and certainly no room for mediocrity. Christopher, the eldest, was the golden boy of the family. Athletic, charming, and confident, he excelled in every sport he touched. Whether it was soccer, basketball, or track, Christopher's name was always on the winner's list. His trophies lined the shelves of their living room, a constant reminder of his brilliance. Lily, the youngest, was the darling of the family. She had been playing the violin since she was 5, and by 7, she was performing at recitals. Their mother doted on her, ensuring every lesson was attended, every performance perfected. Between them was Daniel. Bright, curious, but unnoticed. He had interests, too. He loved books, storytelling, and history. He was an exceptional student, earning high grades and excelling in writing competitions, but these achievements were met with little more than a passing nod. "That's great, Daniel," his mother would say distractedly, already preoccupied with Lily's next recital. His father was no better. He attended every one of Christopher's matches, cheering from the sidelines, analyzing his strategies. But Daniel? He could count on one hand the number of times his father had asked about his interests. Dinner conversations were dominated by Christopher's latest victory or Lily's upcoming performance. Daniel sat quietly, eating his meal, waiting for a moment to interject, but the opportunity never came. The one time he had tried to share something he was proud of, a story he had written for school, his father had barely looked up from his newspaper. "Writing is nice, son, but it's not exactly a career," he had said dismissively. The sting of those words had stayed with Daniel for years. He had learned then that his accomplishments would never measure up to those of his siblings. No matter how hard he tried, he would always be in the background. But Daniel wasn't the type to give up easily. If he couldn't find recognition at home, he would seek it elsewhere. He threw himself into his studies, determined to carve out a space where he could shine. His teachers praised him, his classmates admired his intelligence, but at home, he remained invisible. One evening, he overheard his parents talking in the study. His mother sighed, "Christopher will get into any college he wants with his sports scholarships. And Lily? She's bound for Juilliard. And Daniel?" his father asked absent-mindedly. There was a long pause before his mother replied, "He'll figure something out." The words cut deep. He'll figure something out. As if his future was an afterthought. As if he was just expected to drift through life without direction, without purpose. That night, Daniel made a vow to himself. If no one else would see him, he would make them see him. He just had to find his own path, one that wouldn't require their validation but would force them to acknowledge his worth. Little did he know, his journey was only just beginning. Daniel's teenage years became a quiet rebellion. He never broke the rules, never acted out, but he refused to conform to the roles assigned to him. He immersed himself in writing, staying up late to craft stories that reflected his frustrations, his dreams, his longing for recognition. He found solace in the school library, where the scent of old books and the rustling of pages provided comfort. There, he met Mr. Thompson, the English teacher who would change everything. "You have talent, Daniel," he had said after reading one of his essays. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." For the first time, someone outside his family saw him for who he truly was. Encouraged by Mr. Thompson, Daniel entered a national writing competition. What happened next would set him on a path that no one, not even his parents, could ignore. Daniel's submission to the national writing competition earned him first place. The award ceremony was the first event where he stood in the spotlight, yet even then, his parents' reactions were lukewarm. His mother smiled politely, and his father offered a brief nod of acknowledgement. "Good job," was all he said. Daniel realized then that no amount of validation from his parents would ever be enough. If he wanted to be seen, truly seen, he had to carve out his own destiny, beyond their approval. As Daniel approached his final year of high school, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he could not stay in the shadows any longer. The moment of decision had arrived. College applications loomed ahead, and while Christopher had his athletic scholarships lined up and Lily's Juilliard dreams were already being set in motion, Daniel had yet to make his move. His parents expected him to follow a practical path, perhaps a business degree or law school, something that aligned with the Bennett family's ambitions. But Daniel had no intention of becoming another cog in their machine. Writing was his passion, his refuge, and his purpose. One evening, he sat at the dinner table, nervously tapping his fingers against the wooden surface. He had rehearsed this conversation in his mind 1,000 times. "I've decided I want to apply to Emerson College," he said, clearing his throat. His mother barely looked up from her plate. "That's nice, dear. What do they specialize in?" "Creative writing," Daniel replied, bracing himself. His father finally looked up, furrowing his brows. "Writing? Daniel, that's not a career. That's a hobby. It's not just a hobby, Daniel insisted, his voice steady. I won a national competition. I've been published in the school literary magazine. I've been working toward this for years. His father scoffed. And how do you plan to make a living off that? Writing doesn't pay the bills. Daniel felt the familiar frustration bubbling inside him, but this time, he refused to back down. It does if you're good at it. I've researched scholarship opportunities, and Emerson has one of the best creative writing programs in the country. His mother sighed. Sweetheart, why don't you consider something more stable? You're smart, you could be a lawyer, a professor, anything. I don't want to be anything else. For the first time in years, the room fell silent. Daniel's parents exchanged glances, but neither of them had a response. He had expected a fight, expected more resistance, but instead, their indifference stung deeper. They don't care enough to fight for me, he realized. That night, Daniel filled out his application and mailed it without another word. If his family wouldn't support him, he would support himself. Little did he know, his choice would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. The acceptance letter arrived on a crisp April morning. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his heart pounding as he tore open the envelope from Emerson College. His eyes skimmed the first few lines, and there it was, the word that changed everything. Congratulations. For a moment, he just stared at the letter, hardly believing it. He had done it. He had carved out a future for himself, one that wasn't dictated by his family's expectations. A slow smile spread across his face. But before he could fully savor the moment, he heard footsteps behind him. His mother's voice was distant, distracted. What's that, dear? Daniel hesitated. Would she even care? He took a deep breath and handed her the letter. I got in. Emerson accepted me. She skimmed the letter with a neutral expression, then placed it back on the table as if it were a grocery receipt. Oh, that's nice, Daniel. Have you thought about scholarships? We still need to discuss finances. That was it. No congratulations. No excitement. Just a casual acknowledgement before she turned back to her coffee. Frustration simmered inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. I already applied for financial aid, he said. I also got a partial scholarship for my writing portfolio. His father walked in just in time to hear those words. You're serious about this, then? He asked, frowning. Daniel met his gaze. Yes. His father sighed, rubbing his temples. Daniel, I just don't understand. Writing? It's not a stable career. Why not consider something more practical? Daniel clenched his fists. Because this is what I want. Christopher, who had been leaning against the doorway, smirked. Well, at least someone in this family is doing something interesting. Daniel shot him a look, unsure if that was meant to be supportive or mocking. His father shook his head. Fine. If you're so determined, then you're on your own. We're not paying for an expensive school just so you can chase a dream that won't pay the bills. The words hit like a punch to the gut. He had expected disappointment, maybe even a lecture, but outright refusal? His mother must have sensed the tension because she placed a hand on his father's arm. Henry, let's not be so harsh. No, Evelyn, his father interrupted. If he wants to be independent, let him be independent. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. He wouldn't beg for their support. He had already lived his whole life craving their approval. All right, he said, standing up. I'll do it myself. With that, he walked out of the kitchen, letter in hand, already planning his next steps. The next few months were a blur of part-time jobs, scholarship applications, and saving every penny he could. He worked at a bookstore during the day and took freelance writing gigs at night. It wasn't easy, but for the first time, he felt free to pursue what he loved without trying to fit into his family's mold. His best friend, Jake, was his biggest supporter. "You're doing it, man," Jake said one evening as they sat on the bookstore's rooftop, watching the sunset. "You're actually getting out of here." Daniel smiled. "Yeah. Guess I am." Jake nudged him. "You nervous?" "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "But I'd rather be terrified chasing my dream than stuck in a life I hate." Jake grinned. "That's the spirit. And hey, when you become a famous writer, don't forget about us little people." Daniel laughed. "I won't." But deep down, he knew that while he was stepping into a new world, part of him still longed for something he might never get, his family's pride. Little did he know, life had a few more surprises in store for him. Moving to Boston for college was both exhilarating and terrifying. Daniel arrived at Emerson with nothing but 2 suitcases, a laptop, and a mind full of ambition. The city buzzed with creativity, and for the first time, he was surrounded by people who shared his passion for writing. But independence came at a cost. Between classes, part-time jobs, and mounting bills, exhaustion became his constant companion. Late nights turned into early mornings, and there were moments when he questioned everything. One evening, after a particularly brutal shift at the bookstore, he checked his phone to see a missed call from his mother. His heart pounded as he hesitated, then called her back. "I just wanted to check in," she said. Her voice was softer than he remembered. Daniel was surprised. "Oh. I'm doing okay. Busy, but okay." A pause. "Then, your father thinks you'll come home within a year." Daniel stiffened. "Well, he's wrong." She sighed. "Daniel, we just want what's best for you." "Then why have I never been enough?" He wanted to ask. But instead, he just said, "I know." After they hung up, he stared at his phone for a long time. For years, he had been desperate for their attention. Now, he wasn't sure he needed it anymore. Months passed, and Daniel's hard work began to pay off. His professors praised his writing, and he got a short story published in a well-known literary journal. It was a small success, but to him, it felt like a victory. Then, one day, his inbox lit up with an email. Subject: "Saw your story. Hey, Danny. Mom showed me your article. Pretty good. Didn't know you had it in you. Chris." Daniel stared at the message, rereading it several times. Christopher had read his work? Their mother had actually shared it? It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a grand gesture. But it was something. For the first time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was finally being seen. Years later, Daniel sat in his small yet cozy apartment, the city skyline glowing beyond the window. His debut novel had just been published, a book that carried pieces of his childhood, his struggles, and his journey to finding his own worth. The response had been overwhelming. Messages from readers poured in, many resonating with the themes of neglect, self-discovery, and perseverance. His name was out there, no longer hidden in the shadows. One evening, as he sorted through emails, his phone rang. "Mom." He hesitated before answering. "Hey, Mom. I read your book," she said softly. "It was beautiful." Daniel's throat tightened. He had spent his whole life chasing validation from his parents. And now, in this quiet moment, he finally had it. "Thanks, Mom." A pause. Then, "We're proud of you, Daniel." The words settled over him, warm and unexpected. He had once thought that being seen by them was the only thing that mattered. But now, he realized, he had already found his worth on his own. As he hung up, he looked at the framed words on his desk. His grandmother's handwriting, still clear after all these years. "Write your own story, Daniel. One day, the world will listen." And now, they finally were.